The rust-colored sunlight filtered through the weather-resistant glass dome of Ares Plaza, casting an amber glow over the crowd of engineers, scientists, and dignitaries gathered to celebrate humanity's triumph over the Martian elements. The plaza itself was a testament to human ingenuity, sleek polymer and titanium alloy architecture curving gracefully upward, mimicking the shape of the dome itself. Plants from Earth grew in carefully maintained hydroponics displays, their green leaves a stark contrast to the red desert visible beyond the dome's protective shell. Standing on a raised platform at the center of the plaza, Lieutenant Governor Emerson Vale of the Martian Terraforming Authority adjusted his microphone. His pristine white uniform gleamed under the spotlights, medals of honor and achievement glinting across his chest like a constellation. The crowd's murmurs quieted as he raised his hand. "Citizens of Mars," Vale began, his voice echoing through the plaza. 50 years ago, the first human set foot on this red soil. 40 years ago, the first permanent settlement was established. 30 years ago, the first child was born beneath Martian skies. He paused, allowing applause to ripple through the audience. "And now," he continued, his voice rising, "we stand here, in defiance of a planet that tried to reject us at every turn. We have conquered the Class 5 temperate dust devils that once tore through our early settlements. We have neutralized the acid bloom storms that corroded our equipment and threatened our atmosphere processors. We have weathered the polar cyclones that brought temperatures of -150 degrees Celsius." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. On the front row, the wealthiest patrons, mining magnates, investment bankers from Earth, and colonial aristocrats nodded in self-satisfaction, as if they personally had braved these hazards rather than watched from climate-controlled penthouses. "Mars fears us no more," Vale declared, raising his fist triumphantly. "With the completion of the Northern Weather Control Array, we have tamed this wild planet. The last unpredictable element has been catalogued, controlled, and conquered." Near the back of the crowd, a lone figure stood apart from the celebration. Jax Marlowe leaned against a support column, arms crossed over his weather-beaten jacket. Unlike the colonists in their clean, pressed attire, Jax's clothes showed signs of actual exposure to the elements, reinforced fabric with patched tears, boots caked with the remnants of Martian dust. A jagged scar ran from his left temple down his neck, disappearing beneath his collar, its pattern resembling nothing so much as a lightning strike frozen in flesh. As the applause reached its crescendo, Jax chuckled, a low, knowing sound. "You haven't faced mine," he muttered, just loud enough for those nearest to hear. A woman in a scientific uniform turned to look at him, her brow furrowed. "Excuse me?" Jax's eyes, a peculiar shade of gray that seemed to shift like storm clouds, met hers. "I said, they haven't faced my storms." His accent was difficult to place, not Earth standard, nor the clipped efficiency of Mars-born citizens. The scientist's companion, a young man with the eager face of a junior engineer, leaned forward. "What storms could possibly be worse than Mars's legendary tempests? Have you been to Venus or something?" Before Jax could answer, the scientist pulled her colleague away, shooting Jax a look that clearly communicated her thoughts. Troublemaker, attention seeker, probably unstable. Jax didn't mind. He was used to dismissal. But as the crowd began to disperse, he noticed someone watching him, a woman in the formal gray uniform of the Atmospheric Research Division. Unlike the others, she didn't look away when he caught her gaze. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if making a mental note, before turning to follow the procession of officials leaving the platform. Jax pushed himself off the column and headed toward the exit. He had delivered his message, planted his seed of doubt. Now he would wait and see what grew from it. Outside the main dome, the Martian landscape stretched in every direction, endless rust-colored plains broken by rocky outcroppings and distant mountains. The colony itself was a network of interconnected domes of varying sizes, linked by transparent tunnels reinforced to withstand the planet's harsh conditions. From this vantage point, on an observation deck, the colony resembled nothing so much as a complex organism, with the main dome as its heart and the tunnels as arteries extending outward to smaller nodes of activity. Terraforming rigs dotted the landscape beyond the immediate settlement, massive machines that pumped greenhouse gases into the thin atmosphere, slowly working to make the planet more habitable for human life. Dust scrubber satellites orbited overhead, invisible to the naked eye, but essential for maintaining the delicate atmospheric balance. The newest addition to this technological ecosystem was the Northern Weather Control Array, a ring of transmitters and sensors that monitored and modified weather patterns across a quarter of the planet's northern hemisphere. Jack stood at the viewport, watching as a small dust devil formed and dissipated in the distance, quickly neutralized by the array's interventions. A waste of good energy, he thought. On Vera, they would have harnessed that vortex, ridden it to the next settlement. "You're not from around here," came a voice from behind him. Jax didn't turn. What gave it away? The lack of awe at your technological marvels. The weathering on your jacket. The woman from the ceremony stepped up beside him at the viewport. Up close. Her uniform bore the insignia of a senior official. "That's not Martian dust damage. The coloration is wrong, and the erosion pattern suggests exposure to ionized particles, not silicate abrasion." Now Jax did turn, reassessing her. "You've got a good eye. Scientist." "Dr. Celine Hart, Director of Mars's Atmospheric Research Division." She offered her hand. Jax hesitated before taking it. Jax Marlowe, formerly of Vera. If she recognized the name of the distant colony world, she didn't show it. "Your comment during the ceremony about storms, care to elaborate? Or was that just meant to cause a stir?" "Both," Jax admitted with a half smile. "Though I notice you're out here asking rather than dismissing me as a crank." Selena's expression remained professionally neutral. "The Atmospheric Research Division's mandate is to understand all meteorological phenomena that might affect Mars. If there are storm systems we haven't accounted for in our models, that's of interest to me, even if they're not from Mars. Especially then, weather patterns from other colonized worlds help us refine our understanding of atmospheric physics." She paused. "Though I admit, Vera isn't in our comparative database." Jax turned back to the viewport. "That's because Vera doesn't have weather you can put in a database. Dr. Hart, Vera has something else." Celine waited, but when Jax didn't continue, she prompted, "Which is?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Jax's reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a grim smile. "No one ever does, until they see it for themselves. Try me. I have 3 doctorates in exoplanetary atmospheric sciences." Jax turned fully toward her, studying her face. Celine Hart was perhaps in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. Her posture was perfect, military training, perhaps before academia. She exuded competence and authority. But there was something else there too. Ambition, hunger for knowledge. "Vera is an oceanic world," Jax began, watching her reaction carefully. 97% water, with scattered archipelagos and floating cities. But it's not the water that makes Vera unique, it's what lives in the atmosphere. Airborne organisms. We have those on Mars now, the result of early terraforming efforts. Jax shook his head. "Not like these. On Vera, the storms are alive." Selena's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A flicker of scientific interest, quickly controlled. "Define alive." Sentient might be a better word. The storms on Vera aren't just weather systems, they're bioelectric entities. They form, they grow, they hunt what? Energy, emotion. Jax's hand unconsciously rose to his scar. Fear works best. Now Celine did react, a slight narrowing of her eyes that suggested skepticism. "You're describing something that feeds on an abstraction. That's not scientifically viable. Not by Mars science. Maybe," Jax shrugged. "But I've watched a Veyron storm surge change direction to follow a panicking crowd. I've seen lightning strike precisely and only at the most terrified person in a group. Coincidence? Or selective memory to support a cultural superstition?" "Cultural?" Jax laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Dr. Hart, Vera's been colonized for less than a century. We don't have cultural superstitions yet. We have observations and survival tactics." Before Celine could respond, her comm device chimed. She checked it, frowning. "I have to get back to the lab. There's a situation with the array calibrations." She hesitated, then added, "If you're serious about these bioelectric storms, come to the research division tomorrow. We have a weather simulation chamber that might interest you." Jax raised an eyebrow. "You don't believe me, but you're inviting me to your lab. I believe you experienced something, whether it's what you think it was. That's what science is for." She handed him a small card. "This will get you past security. 1,400 hours. As she walked away, Jax turned the card over in his hand. It was a gamble, engaging with the Martian scientific establishment, but he hadn't come all this way just to mutter cryptic warnings at ceremonies. He had a purpose here, one that had cost him everything to pursue. The hotel room assigned to Jax was small but functional, located in the visitors' quarter of the secondary residential dome. Like everything on Mars, it emphasized efficiency over comfort. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom, all designed to maximize the use of limited space and resources. Jax set his worn duffel bag on the bed and removed a small device about the size of his palm. It resembled nothing so much as an antique compass, but where a compass would have cardinal directions. This had concentric rings of different metals surrounding a central chamber filled with a swirling blue-gray fluid. He placed it on the desk and waited. After a moment, the fluid began to move more vigorously, tiny arcs of electricity jumping between the metal rings. "Still active," he murmured to himself. "Even here." He opened his personal tablet and connected to the colony's information network. A quick search for Dr. Celine Hart brought up hundreds of results: research papers, news articles, award ceremonies. She was a scientific celebrity on Mars. It seemed the pioneer of the weather control technology that the colony now depended on, the architect of Mars's meteorological defense system. Jax skimmed through her most recent publication, Complete Atmospheric Mapping, the final solution to Mars's weather challenges. The arrogance of the title made him shake his head. Complete, final, such dangerous words. A soft ping from his tablet alerted him to an incoming message, not from the Martian network, but from a private channel he maintained. He opened it to find a single line of text. "Did you find her?" A. Jax typed back, "Yes, meeting tomorrow." The response came quickly. "Be careful. Her reputation is well earned." "I'm always careful," Jax replied, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Remember why you're there, Jax. Don't get distracted by revenge." Jax didn't respond to that. Instead, he closed the channel and returned to his research on Dr. Hart. The more he knew about her, the better prepared he would be for tomorrow's meeting. And preparation had kept him alive on Vera, when so many others had fallen to the storms. On his desk, the device's fluid began to pulse in a familiar rhythm. Jax glanced at it, then at the red desert visible through his window. "Not yet," he whispered, as if the device could hear him. "But soon." The Martian Atmospheric Research Division occupied an entire dome of its own, connected to the main colony by a half-kilometer tunnel. As Jax walked through this tunnel the next day, he noted the reinforced construction, thicker than the others, with additional emergency seals every 100 meters, designed to contain catastrophic failures, he realized. Smart. The security checkpoint at the dome entrance was manned by 2 guards in the colonial police uniform. They examined Jax's visitor card with suspicion, running it through their scanner multiple times before reluctantly allowing him entry. "Proceed directly to Lab 7, one instructed. "Do not deviate from the marked path." Inside, the research dome was a hive of activity. Scientists and technicians moved purposefully between workstations, monitoring equipment and testing chambers. The central area featured a massive holographic projection of Mars, with real-time weather patterns swirling across its surface. Around the edges of the dome, specialized labs focused on different aspects of atmospheric research: chemical composition, particle physics, thermodynamics. Jax followed the illuminated path on the floor toward Lab 7, aware of the curious glances from the staff he passed. He didn't fit the profile of their usual visitors. No scientific credentials displayed on his clothing, no corporate sponsors emblazoned on his jacket. Just a weathered survivalist from a distant world they'd barely heard of. Lab 7 turned out to be the largest facility in the dome. A cavernous space dominated by what could only be the weather simulation chamber Celine had mentioned. It was a transparent cylinder 30 meters tall and 15 meters in diameter, reinforced with a lattice of metal supports. Various instruments and control panels surrounded it, staffed by a team of technicians in matching gray uniform. Celine stood at the main control console, conferring with a young man whose enthusiasm was evident even from a distance. When she spotted Jax, she motioned him over. "Mr. Marlowe, thank you for coming." Her tone was professional, giving no indication of whether she'd researched him overnight as he had her. "This is Rylan Cho, my chief systems engineer." Rylan's eyes widened as he looked Jax up and down. "You're the storm guy from the ceremony," he exclaimed, with none of Celine's reserve. "Dr. Hart mentioned you might have some interesting insights for our atmospheric modeling." "That's one way to put it," Jax replied, his attention on the simulation chamber. "What exactly does this thing do?" Celine gestured toward the cylinder. "The Environmental Replication Chamber, ERC for short, can simulate any atmospheric condition we program into it. Temperature, pressure, chemical composition, wind speed, precipitation. Everything from a gentle Earth rain shower to a Category 5 Martian dust storm. We've even recreated conditions from Venus and Titan," Rylan added proudly. "It's the most advanced weather simulation technology in the solar system." "Impressive," Jax acknowledged. "But can it handle bioelectric anomalies?" Selena's expression remained neutral. "That's what we're going to find out. I've reviewed what limited data exists on Vera's atmosphere. The composition is unusual. High concentrations of noble gases and trace elements that aren't typically found in habitable worlds. Which is why we didn't settle there until 50 years ago," Jax confirmed. "The early colonists had to develop specialized breathing apparatus until the first biodomes were established." "What interests me," Celine continued, "is the electrical activity in Vera's upper atmosphere. The satellite data shows patterns unlike anything recorded on other colonized worlds." "Because it's not just electricity," Jax said. "It's bioelectricity, generated by organisms that exist as pure energy." Rylan let out a short laugh, then covered it with a cough when Celine shot him a look. "What Mr. Marlowe is describing," Celine said carefully, "may be an advanced form of atmospheric microorganism that has evolved to generate and manipulate electrical fields. While his interpretation is colorful, the underlying phenomenon could have a scientific explanation." Jax crossed his arms. "You think I'm exaggerating?" "I think your experiences on Vera have led you to personify a complex natural phenomenon. It's a common human response to forces we don't fully understand. And you want me to help you understand it better," Jax concluded, "so you can catalog it, control it, and conquer it, just like your lieutenant governor said yesterday." Celine's expression hardened slightly. I want to understand it because that's what scientists do. Mr. Marlowe, knowledge isn't about conquest. It's about preparation and adaptation. Fine words, Jax acknowledged. But I've seen how Mars applies its knowledge. Before Celine could respond, the door to the lab slid open, and a woman entered who immediately caught Jax's attention. Unlike the uniformed scientists, she wore the practical attire of a pilot, jumpsuits designed for maneuverability in cockpits with multiple pockets and reinforced joints. Her dark hair was cut short, practical for helmet use, and her movements had the confident economy of someone used to operating in tight spaces. "Astra," Jax said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. The pilot froze momentarily, then recovered with a casual nod. "Marlowe, didn't expect to see you here." Selina looked between them. "You two know each other." "Astra Ven is an underground pilot," Jax explained, still watching the newcomer. "She ferried me off Vera 6 months ago, and now she works for the research division as our atmospheric sampler," Celine added, her tone suggesting she was reassessing something. "A fortunate coincidence. Mars is a small colony," Astra said with a shrug that didn't quite convey the casualness she was aiming for. "Everyone ends up crossing paths eventually." Jax knew better. Astra's presence here wasn't coincidence. It was part of the plan. But he played along, turning his attention back to the simulation chamber. "So, how does this work? You want me to describe a Veyron storm, and you'll try to recreate it?" "Precisely," Celine confirmed. "We'll start with a baseline atmospheric composition matching Vera's, then adjust parameters based on your eyewitness account." Jax considered this. It was a chance to show them what they were truly dealing with, to make them understand the danger they were so casually dismissing. But it was also a risk. If the simulation was too accurate, all right, he decided. Let's do it. But I want one condition, which is, when the simulation is complete, you listen to what I have to say about why I'm really here. No scientific dismissals, no rationalization. Just listen. Celine studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed. Rylan, set up the chamber for Veyron atmospheric conditions. Mr. Marlowe, I'll need you at the control console to guide the parameter adjustments." For the next hour, Jax worked alongside the Martian scientists, describing the unique conditions of a Veyron storm system. He detailed the fog-like formation that preceded the major events, tendrils of gray-blue mist that seemed to seek out electrical systems. "The early warning signs are subtle," he explained as Rylan adjusted the chamber's humidity and particulate controls. "Temperature drops first, but not dramatically, just enough to raise goosebumps. Then comes the static, a feeling like the air is charged. Electronics start to malfunction, but not in predictable ways. Some devices amplify their output, others shut down completely." "Sounds like electromagnetic interference," Celine observed, making notes. "Possibly caused by ionized particles in the atmosphere. It's more targeted than that," Jax insisted. "The disruptions focus on communication systems first, almost like the storm is trying to isolate potential victims." Rylan rolled his eyes slightly at this anthropomorphization, but he input the parameters for localized electromagnetic disturbances. "Then comes the visual component," Jax continued. "The mist thickens and begins to glow from within. Bioluminescence in blues and purples. Lightning forms. But it doesn't behave like normal lightning. It doesn't always seek the path of least resistance. Sometimes it hovers. Waits." "Waits for what?" Celine asked, despite herself. "For fear," Jax said simply. "The more afraid people become, the more active the storm gets. It's a feedback loop. Panic intensifies the electrical activity, which causes more panic." "That's just basic psychology," Rylan interjected. "People get scared during storms, which makes them perceive the storms as worse than they are. Except on Vera. We've measured it, Jax countered. When colony-wide calm is maintained through meditation protocols, storm intensity decreases by 60%. When panic breaks out, intensity triples within minutes. This gave even Rylan pause. Celine looked thoughtful as she adjusted another set of parameters. Interesting correlation. I'd want to see the methodology of those studies, but let's simulate that relationship in the chamber. As they worked, the simulation began to take shape, the chamber filled with a swirling mist that gradually took on a bluish tinge. Small arcs of electricity began to form and dissipate near the walls of the cylinder. Instruments around the lab registered increasing electromagnetic activity. We're approaching the energy levels of a standard Martian dust storm, Rylan reported, checking his readings. But the distribution is all wrong. It's too concentrated in specific nodes rather than dispersed throughout the system. That's characteristic of Veyron storms, Jax confirmed. They form neural-like networks, nodes connected by energy pathways, almost like a distributed brain. Celine was about to respond when an alarm sounded from one of the monitoring stations. A technician called out, "Dr. Hart, we're getting unusual readings from the chamber's outer containment field. The electromagnetic activity is somehow bleeding through the insulation." "That's impossible," Celine said, moving quickly to the station. "The ERC is designed to contain energies 10 times what we're currently generating." Jax felt a familiar sensation, a prickling along his scar, a pressure in his ears. He looked at the swirling mist in the chamber, now pulsing with internal light. "It's responding," he said quietly. "What?" Celine turned to him. "The simulation, it's resonating with something, like it's being amplified." "That's not possible," Rylan insisted. "It's just a simulation, an artificial environment with programmed parameters." Another alarm joined the first, this one more urgent. "Energy spikes throughout the system," the technician reported, voice rising. "The chamber's internal temperature is dropping rapidly, now at -20 and falling." Jax reached into his pocket and pulled out the small device he'd checked in his hotel room. The fluid inside was now violently agitated, electricity arcing between the metal rings. "Shut it down," he said, his voice commanding. "We can't just abort a simulation because of some unexpected readings," Rylan protested. "This could be a breakthrough in understanding Veyron atmospheric." "Shut it down now," Jax's voice cut through the lab like a whip crack, "or we're all going to be part of the experiment." Celine looked from Jax's face to the device in his hand, then to the chamber where the mist was now forming distinct tendrils that reached toward the walls. She made her decision. "Emergency shutdown protocol. Rylan, vent the chamber and reset all systems." Rylan hesitated only a second before complying, his fingers flying over the controls. "Venting atmosphere, resetting electromagnetic field generators, initiating full system purge." The mist in the chamber began to dissipate as vacuum pumps activated, drawing the artificial atmosphere out through specialized filters. The blue glow faded, and the arcing electricity diminished. But just before the shutdown completed, a final surge of energy raced through the chamber, a single tendril of blue-white lightning that struck the wall nearest to where Jax stood. The impact was silent, but powerful. A spiderweb of cracks appeared in the transparent aluminum of the chamber wall. "Containment breach!" someone shouted. Alarm klaxons blared throughout the dome as emergency protocols activated. "Everyone out," Celine ordered, her training taking over. "Evacuate to the secondary containment area." Scientists and technicians rushed for the exits as automated systems deployed emergency sealants around the damaged section of the chamber. Jax remained where he was, staring at the crack pattern. It was identical to the scar on his face, the same jagged fork, the same branching tendrils. "Jax!" It was Astra, grabbing his arm. "We need to move, now." He allowed her to pull him toward the exit, his eyes still on the chamber. "It found me," he said, voice barely audible above the alarms. "All the way from Vera. It found me." Celine was the last to leave. pausing at the door to look back at her lab, at the years of research and development now potentially compromised. Her gaze met Jax's across the room, and in that moment, understanding passed between them. This was no longer about scientific curiosity or professional skepticism. This was about survival. The emergency containment protocols had functioned exactly as designed. Lab 7 was sealed off from the rest of the research dome, its atmosphere evacuated and replaced with inert gas to neutralize any potential contaminants. The research staff gathered in the dome's central hub, where emergency coordinators took attendance and assessed the situation. Preliminary readings show no breach beyond Lab 7, a safety officer reported to the assembled scientists. Containment appears to be holding. Celine stood apart from the group, reviewing data on her tablet. Her expression was unreadable, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her concern. Jax approached cautiously, aware of the suspicious glances from the other scientists. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. Celine didn't look up from her tablet. "What was that device you had? The one that reacted to the simulation?" "A storm compass. Standard equipment for navigators on Vera. It detects bioelectric activity and helps ships avoid the worst of the storms. And it was active before we even started the simulation." This wasn't a question. Jax nodded. "It's been active since I arrived on Mars. Faintly at first, but growing stronger." Now Celine did look up, her eyes hard. "You knew this would happen." "I suspected it might. That's why I came to Mars in the first place. To warn you." "Warn us about what exactly?" Before Jax could answer, Rylan joined them, his earlier skepticism replaced by barely contained anger. "The chamber is compromised," he reported to Celine. "Whatever that simulation did, it's damaged the molecular structure of the containment field. We're getting readings that don't make any sense, like the wall itself has been partially converted into some kind of conductive medium." "Bioelectric conversion," Jax said grimly. "The storm transforms matter to create pathways for itself." "That's not scientifically possible," Rylan snapped. "Matter doesn't just change its fundamental properties because of some weather phenomenon. It does when the weather is alive." Jax turned to Celine. "Dr. Hart, remember our agreement. You promised to listen to why I'm really here." Celine hesitated, then nodded curtly. "My office, 5 minutes." She turned to Rylan. "Continue monitoring the situation in Lab 7. Any change at all, you alert me immediately." Celine's office reflected her personality, organized, efficient, with no space wasted on decorative elements. One wall was covered in screens displaying atmospheric data from around Mars. Another held her academic credentials and scientific awards. The desk was large but uncluttered, with just a computer terminal and a few physical notebooks, an old-fashioned touch that spoke to her meticulous nature. Jax took the seat opposite her desk without waiting for an invitation. Astra positioned herself near the door, her posture casual but her eyes alert. "Start talking," Celine said, remaining standing. "And make it convincing." 6 months ago, Jax began, a research vessel from Mars arrived on Vera, the Galileo, under the command of Captain Elias Mercer, with a scientific team led by Dr. Warren Chen. Selena's expression changed at the mention of Chen. "I know Dr. Chen. He's a colleague, a brilliant atmospheric physicist." "Was," Astra corrected quietly from her position by the door. "He's dead, along with the entire crew of the Galileo." Celine sank slowly into her chair. "That's not possible. We received their final transmission 3 months ago. They were completing their research and preparing to return." "That transmission was automated," Jax explained. "Programmed to send regardless of the ship's status. By then, the Galileo had been destroyed and its crew was gone." "How?" Celine demanded. "What happened?" "They came to study Vera's storms," Jax said, his voice flat. "Like you? They were fascinated by the unusual electrical properties, the bioluminescence, the behavior patterns that defied conventional meteorology." But unlike you, they weren't content to observe from a distance. They wanted samples. Atmospheric samples are standard procedure for any exoplanetary research. Celine defended. There's nothing dangerous about collecting gas and particulate matter. Except when what you're collecting isn't just gas and particles, Jax countered. The Galileo used specialized equipment to capture what they called energy constructs from the heart of a Veyron storm. They succeeded, and that's when everything went wrong. Astra picked up the narrative. I was contracted as a local guide for their expedition. We warned them not to interfere with the storms, but Dr. Chen was determined. He believed the bioelectric entities could be harnessed as an energy source, clean, renewable power generated by living atmospheric conditions. The containment systems on the Galileo weren't designed for what they captured. Jax continued. The storm fragment escaped, but not before it had evolved. Contact with the ship's systems, with Earth technology, changed it, made it more adaptive, more aggressive, and more curious about the beings that had captured it, Astra added. It started hunting crew members, not just for the energy their fear produced, but to learn about them, about us. Celine shook her head, struggling to reconcile this account with her scientific understanding. You're describing sentient weather. It's beyond implausible. Is it? Jax leaned forward. Your own research acknowledges that atmospheric conditions can develop complex patterns, that weather systems can self-organize in ways that resemble intelligence. Why is it so hard to believe that on a world with different physical laws, different evolutionary paths, actual intelligence might emerge in a non-biological form? Because intelligence requires structure, neurons, circuitry, some physical mechanism for storing and processing information. Celine argued. Pure energy can't think. Maybe not on Mars. Jax conceded. But Vera isn't Mars. And what the Galileo captured wasn't just energy. It was a fragment of a larger consciousness, one that's been evolving in Vera's atmosphere for millennia. Celine was silent for a long moment, processing this. Finally, she asked, if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying it is, why come to Mars? Why not contain this threat on Vera? Because it's already here, Jax said simply. After destroying the Galileo, the storm fragment accessed the ship's navigation system. It learned about Mars, about the world that had sent people to study it. And it was intrigued. Spores, Astra explained. The storms on Vera reproduce through microscopic bioelectric spores that ride the high-altitude winds. The fragment released spores into the Galileo's communication array during its final transmission. When that transmission reached Mars, the spores came with it. Celine finished, the color draining from her face. You're saying we have Veyron storm spores in our communication systems? In your entire atmospheric control network, Jax confirmed. They've been incubating for 3 months, gradually adapting to Mars's environment, studying your technology, your people, your fears. What happened in the lab today wasn't a coincidence. It was the first attempt at communication. Or the first stage of invasion, Astra added grimly. Celine stood abruptly, moving to the wall of screens displaying Mars's atmospheric data. If what you're saying is true, there would be signs, electromagnetic anomalies, temperature fluctuations, unexplained power surges. Check the Northern Array, Jax suggested. The newest, most advanced part of your weather control system, the part that interfaces directly with your global communication network. Celine's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up diagnostic data from the Northern Weather Control Array. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she scrolled through the information. There have been irregularities, minor power fluctuations, system resets, unusual energy signatures at the outer edges of our monitoring range. We attributed them to integration issues with the new hardware. It's testing your defenses, Jax said. learning how your systems work, how they respond to different stimuli, just like it did on the Galileo before it struck. Selina turned back to face them, her scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before her. Even if I accept this outlandish theory, what do you propose we do? Shut down our entire atmospheric control system, the colony would be exposed to Martian storms that would kill thousands. Not shut it down, Jax corrected. Quarantine it, isolate the affected systems while we develop a countermeasure. We? Celine raised an eyebrow. That's why we're here, Astra said. Jax is the foremost expert on Veyron's storms. He grew up navigating them, studying them. If anyone can help you develop a defense, it's him. And why should I trust either of you? Celine demanded. You show up the day before a catastrophic lab accident with a wild story about sentient storms from another world and expect me to put Mars's survival in your hands. Jax stood, pulling down the collar of his jacket to fully reveal the lightning scar that ran down his neck and disappeared beneath his clothing. Because I've faced these storms before. Dr. Hart, I've survived what they can do. This scar. It runs from my temple to my hip, the result of a direct strike when I was 16. I was the only survivor of a storm ship that carried 30 people. He stepped closer, his gray eyes intense. I don't expect you to trust me. I expect you to be a scientist, to examine the evidence, to consider possibilities beyond your current understanding, and to act on the best information available. Right now. That's me. Before Celine could respond, her comm device chimed with an urgent alert. She checked it, her expression darkening. There's been a breach in Lab 7's containment. Whatever it is, has escaped into the dome's ventilation system. As if on cue, the lights in her office flickered, then stabilized. A moment later, a low rumble shook the building, distant but powerful. What was that? Astra moved away from the door, her hand instinctively reaching for the utility knife at her belt. Sounds like the emergency bulkhead's activating, Celine said, moving quickly to her computer terminal. The dome's automated defense systems must have detected a threat. The screens on the wall flickered, then displayed a schematic of the research dome with flashing red indicators throughout the ventilation system. Alarm notifications began to appear faster than they could be read. It's spreading, Jax said grimly. And it's using your own defense systems to isolate potential hosts, just like on the Galileo. Celine looked from the screens to Jax, her scientific skepticism finally giving way to the reality before her. What do we do? First, we need to get to the central control room, Jax decided. If the storm spores are in the ventilation system, they'll be heading for the environmental controls next. Then communication. Then power. Why that sequence? Celine asked, already gathering essential equipment from her desk. A tablet, an emergency breather mask, a small toolkit. They target systems in order of how they affect human survival, Astra explained, checking the exits. First air, then information, then energy. It's how they maximize fear. And fear is still what they feed on, Jax added, which means our most important defense is staying calm. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, do not give in to panic. It will only make the storm stronger. Celine nodded, her training taking over. The central control room is 2 levels up, in the secure section of the dome. We'll need to take the emergency stairwell. If the ventilation is compromised, the elevators aren't safe. Lead the way, Jax said, pulling his storm compass from his pocket. The fluid inside was now a violent maelstrom, electricity continuously arcing between the metal rings. And hurry, we don't have much time. The emergency stairwell was designed for function, not comfort. Stark white walls, steel steps, and harsh lighting that cast sharp shadows. As the trio climbed, the building trembled periodically, small showers of dust falling from the ceiling with each disturbance. The research dome is equipped with seismic stabilizers, Celine explained as they ascended. These tremors shouldn't be possible unless something is interfering with the structural integrity fields. The storm isn't just in your ventilation system, Jax said, checking his compass again. It's in the walls, the support beams, anywhere with electrical conduits or metal that can conduct energy. How is that possible? Celine demanded. The containment breach was less than 30 minutes ago. Time works differently for them, Astra explained. They experience reality at an accelerated rate. What feels like minutes to us could be hours or days to a bioelectric entity. They reached a security door marked Level 3, Authorized Personnel Only. Celine pressed her palm to the scanner, but instead of the expected green confirmation light, it flashed red. She tried again with the same result. "System's not recognizing me," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "It's like my access has been revoked." "Not revoked," Jax corrected. "Corrupted. The storm is learning how your security systems work." Celine turned to the manual override, a physical keypad protected by a metal cover. As she reached for it, Jax grabbed her wrist. "Wait," he warned. "Metal components could be compromised. Use this." He handed her a small tool from his pocket, a stylus-like device with an insulated handle. Celine used the tool to input her override code. After a tense moment, the door clicked and slid partially open, enough for them to squeeze through one at a time. Beyond the door, the corridor leading to the central control room was eerily quiet. The normal hum of equipment and chatter of technicians was absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. "Where is everyone?" Astra whispered, moving cautiously forward. "Emergency protocols would have evacuated non-essential personnel," Celine replied, though she sounded uncertain. "The control room should still be staffed with the core team." They approached the control room doors, massive reinforced barriers designed to protect the dome's brain in case of catastrophic events. Like the security door before. These showed signs of malfunction, status lights flickering erratically, the usual electronic hum replaced by an irregular buzzing. Jax checked his compass one final time. The device was now hot to the touch, the fluid inside almost solid with electrical activity. "It's concentrated here," he warned. "Whatever's on the other side of those doors. It's not just your control room team." Celine squared her shoulders. "Only one way to find out." She approached the door controls, using Jax's insulated tool to activate the emergency release. The massive doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the central control room beyond. The space was a marvel of Martian engineering, a circular chamber filled with workstations, holographic displays, and monitoring equipment. A central platform held the main control interface, surrounded by a ring of secondary consoles. But something was very wrong. The air shimmered with a faint blue haze. Tendrils of what looked like luminescent fog twisted through the room, connecting workstations in patterns reminiscent of neural pathways. And the control room staff. "Oh God," Celine breathed. The technicians sat at their stations, apparently unharmed, but completely unresponsive. Their eyes were open, staring blankly at their screens, fingers moving across controls with mechanical precision. Around each of them, the blue haze was more concentrated, forming what almost looked like cocoons of light. "Don't approach them," Jax warned, holding Celine back as she instinctively moved toward the nearest technician. "They're being used as conduits." "Conduits for what?" Celine demanded, her scientific mind still struggling to categorize what she was seeing. "For the storm consciousness," Astra explained, her voice low. "It's using them to interface with your systems. Human brains are excellent conductors for bioelectric energy." Are they still alive?" Celine asked, unable to take her eyes off her colleagues. "Yes," Jax confirmed, "but they are not in control. The storm entity is using their knowledge, their access, their understanding of the systems." As if triggered by these words, every screen in the control room suddenly activated, displaying the same image, a swirling pattern of blue-white energy that pulsed in a rhythm reminiscent of a heartbeat. The technicians' movements became more synchronized, their fingers dancing across controls in perfect unison. "What is it doing?" Celine whispered. Jax moved carefully toward the central platform, studying the main display. "It's accessing the colony's environmental controls, specifically the Northern Weather Control Array." A holographic representation of Mars appeared above the central console, with the array highlighted as a network of interconnected nodes across the northern hemisphere. As they watched, the nodes began to change color, from the standard green of normal operation to an ominous blue that matched the haze in the room. "It's taking control of the array," Celine realized, horror dawning on her face. "If it can manipulate our weather control systems, it can create the perfect conditions for a full-scale Veyron storm on Mars." Jax finished grimly. "Conditions that would allow the spores to mature, to spread, to transform the entire Martian atmosphere into a host for bioelectric entities." "How do we stop it?" Astra asked, hand still on her knife, though she knew it would be useless against this enemy. Jax was silent for a moment, his eyes on the swirling patterns on the screens. When he spoke, his voice was low but clear. "We need to communicate with it." "Communicate?" Celine stared at him. "You said this thing destroyed an entire research vessel. It's taken over my staff, my facility, and now it's targeting the entire colony. What could we possibly say to it?" "The entity that destroyed the Galileo was defending itself," Jax explained. "It was captured, imprisoned, studied against its will. This offspring is curious. It's exploring, learning. It doesn't understand the harm it's causing." "How can you know that?" Celine demanded. "Because it hasn't killed anyone yet," Jax said simply. "It could have. Easily. The bioelectric discharge that cracked your simulation chamber could just as easily have struck one of us. The entity in your ventilation system could have electrocuted everyone in this dome, but it didn't." "So what do you suggest?" Astra asked, skepticism evident in her tone. "We just ask it nicely to leave Mars alone?" "Not exactly." Jax reached into his jacket and removed a second device, similar to his compass but more complex, with additional rings of different metals and a larger central chamber. "This is a fear harmonic device. It's what storm riders on Veyra use to navigate the worst tempests." "How does it work?" Celine asked, professional curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "It generates a counter-frequency to the bioelectric signals produced by the storm entities," Jax explained. "Essentially, it creates a pocket of calm, a space where the storm can't feed on fear because the emotional frequency is neutralized." "And you think this will work on whatever this is?" Celine gestured at the blue haze permeating the room. "Not alone," Jax admitted. "This device is calibrated for Veyron storms. The entity here has adapted, evolved. It's part Veyron, part Martian now, a hybrid creature born of both worlds." "So we need to adapt the device," Astra concluded. "Yes. And to do that, I need access to the array's control systems." Jax looked at Celine. "I need your help. Dr. Hart, you designed these systems. You understand them better than anyone." Celine hesitated, looking from Jax to the possessed technicians to the screens displaying the storm entity's progress across Mars's atmospheric control network. Science and logic warred with the impossible reality before her. "What exactly do you need me to do?" she finally asked. "I need to connect this device to the main control interface," Jax explained. "The fear harmonic works by generating a counter-frequency, but to be effective, that frequency needs to be transmitted through the same network the entity is using. In this case, the Northern Array. You want to use our weather control system to broadcast an anti-fear signal?" Celine's skepticism returned. "Essentially, yes. The array was designed to influence atmospheric conditions across the planet. We're just going to use it for a different kind of atmosphere." A violent tremor shook the room, stronger than any before. Warning alerts flashed across multiple screens as systems throughout the colony began to report failures. Dome integrity compromised in sectors 7 through 12, an automated voice announced. Pressure differentials detected. Emergency bulkheads activating. We're out of time, Astra warned, moving to secure the control room doors. The entity is spreading beyond the research dome. Celine made her decision. All right, but we'll need to reach the central console, and as you can see, she gestured to the possessed technicians surrounding the platform. That won't be easy. Leave that to me. Jax adjusted something on his fear harmonic device, causing the fluid inside to pulse with a soft green glow. This won't stop them, but it should create enough interference to give us a path through. He activated the device, and immediately the blue haze nearest to them recoiled slightly, creating a corridor of clearer air. The possessed technicians nearest the disruption twitched and shuddered, their synchronized movements becoming erratic. Now, Jax urged, moving forward through the path. Stay close to me. The trio advanced toward the central platform, keeping within the bubble of protection created by Jax's device. As they passed each possessed technician, the person would briefly convulse before returning to their automated tasks, the blue haze quickly re-establishing itself behind the group. They reached the central console, where the holographic display of Mars continued to show the storm entity's progress. Now nearly 70% of the northern array had turned blue. I need direct access to the primary control matrix, Jax said, examining the console. Where's the main interface? Celine moved to a specific section of the console, using her override codes to expose a normally hidden access port. Here, this connects directly to the array's command protocols, but you'll need administrative authorization to make any changes. Can you provide that? I can try, but if the entity has corrupted the security systems, do it, Jax insisted, preparing his device for connection. Selena placed her palm on the biometric scanner and entered a complex sequence of commands. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, to their surprise, the console chimed acceptance. It worked, Celine said, unable to hide her shock. The entity wants to see what we're doing, Astra realized, looking around at the blue haze that had noticeably thinned around the central platform. It's curious. Jax nodded, connecting his device to the interface. Good. That curiosity might save us all. He began calibrating the fear harmonic, adjusting settings based on readings from the array. Dr. Hart, I need you to establish a broadcast protocol that will transmit through all active nodes of the array simultaneously. Celine worked beside him, her fingers flying over the controls. Setting up network-wide distribution, redirecting power from secondary systems to boost signal strength. The holographic display shifted, showing a new pattern overlaid on the blue-infected network, a green wave slowly spreading from the central command node. It's working, Astra observed, watching as the green pattern expanded. The counter frequency is being accepted by the network. But then, something unexpected happened. The blue haze in the room began to concentrate, gathering into a swirling vortex above the central platform. The possessed technicians rose from their stations in perfect unison, moving to surround the trio at the console. It's resisting, Jax warned, making rapid adjustments to his device. The entity recognizes the threat and is mobilizing its hosts to stop us. We need more power, Celine said, frantically rerouting resources through the colony's power grid. The signal isn't strong enough to reach the outer nodes of the array. There is another option, Jax said, his voice suddenly quiet. He looked at his fear harmonic device, then at the swirling blue vortex above them. The device works by generating a counter-frequency to fear, but there's another emotion that can neutralize the storm entities more effectively. What emotion? Celine asked, still working on the console. Empathy. Jax's hand moved to his scar. On Vera, the most skilled storm riders don't just navigate the tempests, they communicate with them. They form a connection based on mutual understanding. You want to connect with that thing? Astra stared at him. Jax, that's suicide. The direct neural interface would fry your brain. Not if the fear harmonic protects me. Jax made a final adjustment to the device. And not if you two maintain the broadcast while I make contact. Before either woman could stop him, Jax activated a new function on the device. The green fluid inside began to glow more intensely, and tendrils of energy, similar to but distinct from the blue haze, extended from the device toward the vortex above. What are you doing? Celine demanded, alarmed. Creating a bridge, Jax explained. His voice strained as he concentrated on controlling the energy flow. A safe pathway for communication between my consciousness and the entities. The green tendrils reached the blue vortex and began to intertwine with it, creating a swirling pattern of blue and green energy. Jax's body went rigid, his eyes rolling back to show only whites. The scar on his face began to glow with the same blue-green light as the vortex. Jax! Astra moved to pull him away, but Celine grabbed her arm. Wait, Celine ordered. Look at the display. The holographic map of Mars showed something remarkable. The blue and green patterns were no longer fighting for dominance, but instead merging, creating a new pattern that spread rapidly through the array. The possessed technicians had stopped advancing and now stood motionless, their blank expressions replaced by looks of confusion. What's happening? Astra asked, watching as the blue haze throughout the room began to change, taking on a greenish tinge. I think, Celine hesitated, struggling to find scientific language for the inexplicable. I think they're talking. Minutes passed in tense silence. The vortex above the platform continued to swirl, now a complex mixture of blue, green, and colors they had no names for. Jax remained rigid, connected to the entity through his fear harmonic device, his scar pulsing with light in a rhythm that matched the vortex. Finally, the pattern began to stabilize. The harsh, chaotic swirling slowed, becoming more organized, more harmonious. Jax's body relaxed slightly, though his eyes remained white. Dr. Hart, he said, his voice overlaid with a strange harmonic quality that made it sound as if multiple people were speaking at once. The entity wishes to communicate with you directly. Selina looked at Astra, who nodded encouragingly. How? Celine asked, approaching Jax cautiously. Touch the device, Jax instructed, holding out the fear harmonic, which now glowed with an inner light that shifted between blue and green. Hesitantly, Celine placed her fingers on the edge of the device. Immediately, a sensation like static electricity raced up her arm, but instead of pain, it brought understanding. Images, feelings, concepts flowed into her mind, not in words, but in pure information transferred directly to her consciousness. She saw the Veyran storms as they truly were, not weather phenomena, but complex energy beings that had evolved in the planet's unique atmosphere. She felt their curiosity about the strange solid creatures that had come to their world, building structures and machines. She experienced their confusion when the Galileo's crew had captured a fragment of their consciousness, their distress at being imprisoned and studied. And she understood the entity that now occupied Mars's atmosphere. A child, essentially. A new consciousness born from the interaction between Veyran energy and Martian technology, exploring its environment the only way it knew how. It doesn't want to harm us, Celine said aloud, her voice filled with wonder. It's trying to understand us, to communicate. The possession, the system takeovers, those were attempts at connection, not attacks. Yes, Jax confirmed, his multi-toned voice somehow gentler now. But it doesn't understand the damage it causes. It experiences reality differently. What seems destructive to us is simply interaction to it. Celine's scientific mind raced with the implications. So if we could establish proper communication protocols, a way for it to interact with our systems without disrupting them. Coexistence, Astra realized, not conquest. The blue-green vortex pulsed, as if in agreement. Celine felt another flood of information through her connection to the device. Technical specifications, energy requirements, interface designs. The entity was offering a solution. It wants to help us modify the array, Celine explained to Astra, her eyes wide with amazement. To create a system that can harness its energy while allowing it to exist safely within our atmosphere, a symbiotic relationship. Like the storm ships on Vera, Jax added, a hint of his normal voice breaking through the harmonic overlay. Where humans and storms work together, navigate together. The possessed technicians began to move again, but this time their actions were coordinated and purposeful. They returned to their stations and began inputting new command sequences, implementing the modified protocols that would allow human and entity to coexist. Slowly, the blue-green energy throughout the room began to dissipate, not vanishing but redistributing itself into the colony's systems in a controlled, non-disruptive manner. The holographic display of Mars showed the new pattern spreading globally, a harmonious network that enhanced rather than corrupted the existing infrastructure. Jax's connection to the entity gradually faded, the light in his scar dimming as his eyes returned to normal. He swayed on his feet, exhausted by the neural interface. Astra moved quickly to support him, her face showing both relief and concern. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice hoarse but his own again. Celine checked the readings on the console, her expression one of amazement. "Better than worked. The entity has integrated with our systems in a way that amplifies their efficiency by nearly 300%. The array is functioning beyond its design specifications, and energy consumption has dropped to minimal levels." "And the technicians?" Astra asked, looking at the staff who were now blinking in confusion, as if waking from a deep sleep. "The direct neural connections have been severed," Celine confirmed. "The entity understood that controlling humans caused distress. It's found a more appropriate interface through our technology." Throughout the dome, systems were coming back online. The emergency lighting switched to standard illumination, and the tremors that had shaken the structure ceased. Automated announcements reported all systems returning to normal operation. Jax slumped into a chair, the fear harmonic device still clutched in his hand. Its fluid now pulsed with a steady, calm rhythm, blue and green in perfect balance. "You did it," Astra said, squeezing his shoulder. "You established first contact with an alien intelligence. That's unprecedented." "We did it," Jax corrected, looking up at Celine. "Your willingness to listen, to understand rather than control, that's what made this possible." Selina was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Finally," she said, "I came to Mars to study its atmosphere, to protect human settlements from natural forces. I never imagined those forces might be conscious. That protection might mean communication rather than control. That's the lesson Vera taught us," Jax said, running a finger along his scar. "The storms aren't enemies to be conquered. They're potential allies, if we approach them with respect rather than fear." In the days that followed, Mars underwent a transformation. The blue-green energy, which Celine had officially designated as a bioelectric atmospheric symbiote, spread throughout the colony's environmental systems, enhancing their performance while manifesting in harmless, often beautiful displays of luminescence in the night sky. The research team worked tirelessly to understand this new phenomenon, developing protocols for safe interaction and establishing more sophisticated communication interfaces. Jax's Fear harmonic device became the template for a new generation of tools designed specifically for human symbiote interaction. 1 week after the event in the control room, Jax stood on the observation deck once more. watching the Martian sunset. The sky was different now. Streaks of blue-green light danced among the clouds, creating patterns that reminded him of the storm-swept skies of Vera. Celine joined him at the viewport, her uniform now bearing a new insignia, the emblem of the newly formed Symbiotic Relations Division. "The governor has approved the research initiative," she reported. "We'll be sending a delegation to Vera next month to study the original storm entities in their natural environment, with proper protection and communication protocols this time," she added with a wry smile. "And they want me to lead it," Jax guessed, noting the tentative way she approached the subject. "You're the only human who successfully communicated with both Veran and Martian entities," Celine pointed out. "Your experience is invaluable." Jax considered this, watching a particularly vibrant tendril of blue-green energy twist through the clouds. "I came to Mars to warn you of a danger," he said thoughtfully. "I never expected to be going back to Vera as part of a scientific expedition." "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," Celine observed. "Science even less so." Astra approached from the entrance to the observation deck. "Transport's ready whenever you are," she informed them. "The modified shuttle can accommodate the symbiote's energy requirements for the journey." Jax nodded, taking one last look at the transformed Martian sky. The scar on his face caught the light of the setting sun, its pattern matching the energy formations in the clouds above. "We can conquer storms," he said quietly, echoing a thought he'd had many times since his first encounter with the Veran tempests. "But can we conquer the fear within?" As if in response, a single tendril of blue-green light descended from the clouds, touching the dome just above where they stood. It didn't crack the transparent aluminum, didn't seek to breach the human habitat. Instead, it traced a pattern on the surface, a perfect replica of Jax's scar, glowing against the darkening sky. "I think," Celine said, watching the display with scientific wonder and human awe, "that the answer is, we don't need to conquer it at all. We just need to understand it." The light pulsed once, brightly, before rejoining the dance of energy in the clouds. Not conquered, not tamed, but in harmony, distinct consciousnesses sharing a single sky. And somewhere in that swirling pattern, Jax thought he could feel the presence of something ancient and new all at once. Watching, learning, growing alongside its human companions. A storm beyond Mars, beyond Vera, beyond anything humans had imagined possible. A storm that now, perhaps, they wouldn't have to face alone.